Hi, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Sanjana, and I'm with the admissions and outreach team at Azim Premji University. As you may all know, the university was established in the year 2010 under the Azim Premji University Act of the Government of Karnataka. Azim Premji Foundation set up the university as a fully philanthropic and not for profit institute with a clear social purpose. The university aims to prepare competent, motivated, and socially committed graduates who can significantly contribute to the education and development sectors in India. We wish to inform you all that the last day to apply for our postgraduate programs for the academic year 2022 is 28th February. Today, we have with us Prakash Iyer, member of faculty with the School of Education, and the topic to be discussed today is the role of language in learning and teaching. We are sure you will have a lot of queries. Request you to kindly wait till the end of the presentation and we will answer them all. Over to you, Prakash.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjana. And hello, everyone. So today, in this session, I thought I would speak about the relationship between language and the activities that are core to education, learning and teaching. And at the face of it, all of us do understand that language plays an important role in any form of communication, not only teaching and learning. But you and I are speaking now, and I am choosing language to speak, right? And all of us commonsensically already also know that language is not only words spoken, right? That two people are talking to each other. Okay? The tone of the voice that people use, or the same sentence, I could say in many different ways in which they would mean something completely different. You know, something as simple as "What do you mean?" I could ask, "What do you mean?" which would become a query, a question. Or I could just say, what do you mean? That would be an exclamation, which is like, expressing expressing that I think what you're saying is ridiculous. Okay. Or I could just say it with a different emotion, making it sound like frustration. What do you mean? So we know that language literally doesn't mean spoken sentences. Like as I demonstrated, the way you speak, it also includes a lot of emotions in it, and in the process what emotion you add ends up expressing something completely different. And all of us know, I'm sure many of us would have gone through many situations in life when we are being misunderstood by someone. And teachers and children, teachers and learners are not cannot escape from this either. That when I am teaching as a teacher, it's very possible that I speak something in a certain way, and students probably end up learning uh, something else or learning the wrong thing, right? And commonsensically, like I said, that's all of us know this. To this level, we know the importance of language. So what more is there for me to add? Okay. So I'll just start with explaining learning as a process. And I'll just keep school children in mind, you know, starting from the age of 3 or 4, to uh, you know, imagine a 10th standard child, which is around the age of 15 or 16. And to that, I'll just try and describe the process of learning and all the things that learning involves, so, which will explicate the importance of these things that I said about language, but it would also add some additional responsibilities to language. eh, That it is not merely spoken words and how you speak, but the importance of language when it comes to learning in that age increases significantly, because learning at that time is a fairly complex process. So, like I uh, like I said that let's go with just this basic definition of language, that it is spoken words with some emotions added to it, and which leads to a different kind of expression. We keep this definition of language in our mind, and then now we move to learning. Now, what is learning? Again, about learning, all of us know, right? All of us are grown up, and all of us have learned numerous things in school, outside school, from our parents, from our friends, and even now, some of you are hoping to learn something from this talk that I'm giving. Right? So, learning is a very familiar thing for all human beings. Okay? But when it comes to school education and you know the act of learning when it comes to small children, there are some significant things related to learning which I want to highlight today. Okay. The first thing about learning that I want to highlight is that it is an intentional activity, that the learner has to intentionally put some effort and listen to the teacher, listen to the friend, listen to the parent, okay? And only if they will that I am going to learn, only then they would learn something. Like if you imagine a school classroom, that's why in the initial years, most of the effort of a teacher goes in catching the attention of a child. Right? And attention in a particular way, right? Attention in such a way that the child is listening and responding and intending to learn. Okay, that's the one complexity about learning that I want to highlight. That it is intentional, not merely intentional in that you come into the classroom, you listen to the teacher, and you walk out. It is a higher level of intention, in that your mind should be open to accepting truths, accepting things, and accepting new concepts, unknown things that the teacher is teaching. Which brings me to the second point I want to highlight. The second point is that learning in general, and particularly in school, necessarily involves the formation of unknown concepts, right? That a 4-year-old child coming into class, okay, may have an idea about numbers, may also be able to speak and communicate. Okay. But when a teacher teaches, say, the standard decimal number system, 1, 2, 3, 4 until 10, or in Hindi, 1, 2, 3, or in Tamil, 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay. The concept of a number is a new concept. Right? That is something the child doesn't know. Okay. And it's not only numbers, you keep progressing science, social studies, you know, and various branches of science, various branches of social studies. All those things slowly start accumulating numerous unknown concepts. Okay? And it is not only unknown in the simple sense of numbers or alphabets in early childhood, but these are foundational concepts which rest on more higher order concepts which they will learn later. Right? When you start learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, unless you understand numbers well, you would not be able to learn addition, subtraction. You start with something like basic, like gravity in science. Okay. Unless you understand gravity correctly, you will not be able to understand centrifugal force, centripetal force, and all those various things which contribute to gravity and making it much more complex and gives you that magic number 9.8 meters per centimeter square, which is the acceleration due to gravity. And you see, when I said acceleration due to gravity, you start with gravity and then you have to accumulate numerous other concepts, acceleration plus a fair amount of mathematical concepts. And that's why language and numeracy are considered foundational, that these are basic concepts on which further education builds. And all this is necessarily unknown to the learner. That is the second point. And third important point is about learning is that when one really learns, okay, it transforms the person. That till yesterday I did not know the number system, and today I learned the number system, and I learned the decimal number system. After I learned this, I am a changed person, right? Because it changes the way I see the world. I start seeing numbers everywhere. You know, right now when I'm looking at the screen, I see one nose, two glasses, 2 ears. That all of us, there's a proliferation of such basic concepts. That I'm sitting on this chair, I see gravity holding me down. Right? That I'm talking to you, I make this assumption that all of you are grown up and you have locked in here, so you're intentionally, with your consent, you're listening to me. Right? All these are the things that I see. That's what I mean by transforms a person. And this transformation of a person happens only if you absorb learning, you learn in such a way that you learn the meaning of things, and that becomes part of the way you think. Right? That that if you decide not to learn mathematics, okay, you would remain a certain kind of person, you would remain a good person, okay, but you, unless you intend to do that, it will not transform your mind in such a way that you will be able to comprehend patterns, numbers, which play a very important role in the way we engage with the world, right? Similarly, social studies, you engage with the notion of freedom, then you start seeing times when you're free and times when you're not free, times when you're not allowed to be free. You understand those things, that indicates that there is a transformation that has happened for in a person who has learned things, right? And it is, so these are the 3 points I want to highlight about learning. That one, it is an intentional activity. Two, it involves the formation of unknown concepts, okay, and how concepts are related with each other. And the third is that it transforms a person. Okay. And when you learn something, you also, you know, there is a fourth part, that when you learn a subject, okay, you learn the rules that are part of the subject. That mathematics is an easy example. That numbers are ideas that are invented by the human mind, okay, but they follow certain rules, right? That the number two is greater than the number one. It would be illogical for me to say one thing is more than two things, right? Or when I say gravity, okay, I cannot, you know, gravity is dependent on the acceleration that is created when the earth revolves around the sun at a certain speed, okay, and the sun pushes the earth away, but the sun has an orbit which pulls it towards. Similarly, the earth pushes us away from it, draws us back. Okay, these are rules uh, that are the centripetal and the centrifugal force. All those concepts are rules that are part of science. That science follows a certain logic. Social studies, the notion of freedom, it has its own set of rules, right? There is a certain definition of free. Okay. I can't say I'm tied, I'm not allowed to do anything, but I'm free. It would sound like it is a contradiction, right? So there are different rules that one is learning when one learns a subject. Now, these are again things that most of you know. Now, if we go one step further and try and dig a little deeper into the process of learning, that you know, I'm walking into a class. Before I walk in, I don't know many things. I don't know some words, or I don't know some concepts. And then all of us expect that when we walk out of the class, I come out a changed person, and I should have learned numbers or something in such a way that it changes the way I see the world. Okay. How does this process happen? All of us know that. one basic idea about learning, if I want to intentionally make someone learn, the first thing I do is I create an experience. Right? A classroom is a set of experiences. When you walk in, there is a syllabus, and the teacher keeps thinking, how do I introduce the idea of numbers to them? Or how do I introduce gravity to them? How do I? So when they do that, they create a certain situation, right? That there is a number. I'll just take a simple example so that we can worry about the process and not the example itself. So let's imagine a situation when numbers are being introduced to children. How would a teacher create an experience? We take a piece of paper and say this is one paper. Okay. And then I take a piece of pen, and say this is one pen. I keep using the word one, right? This is one wire. This is one thing. This is one phone. And these are all experiences that I'm creating, right? And in the process, I keep saying the word one, one, one. Okay. For a child who walks into the class, this one is just noise, right? I could, I could say eight, I could say da da da, I could say use some gibberish. Okay. That would be the same as saying number one for a child, right? So while experience is important, what about how does the child understand that one, the word one should transform into a symbol? That one is, when you say one, you're imagining one thing, one person, you're attaching it to something, and both of them together, right? If I take this paper and I say one paper, you expect the child to say that, oh, understand not that this is one, this paper is called one. You're expecting the child to understand that this is one instance of one thing. So that later, when you show this phone, you expect the child to associate the same one with the phone, right? How does this connection happen? That this connection is difficult for us to imagine because you know that the child doesn't know the word one. It is just noise. Then if we stick only to experience, all we will do is we'll keep repeating this thing again and again. At some point, the child will get frustrated and just say, one. Oh, the teacher expects me to say one. So I raise a pen, the child will say one. And we all know that is not enough. Then what happens? What more is expected from the child when she learns? And I would term, and I'm borrowing from Israel Scheffler, I would say that the child has to develop insight into the concept, right? That it is not just the noise. Okay, the child should understand that this is a symbol. Okay, that one is just a word. I could say ek, I could say unna, I could say vandu, anything, but that is a symbol. Okay, or the written one is a symbol. Okay, but that is not all. It actually represents a value of something. That insight into that concept, then the child would be able to apply it to something else that you don't expect also, like a kite flying in the air, and the child would say, one kite. Okay, that is a creative moment for the child, right? And we could use different words. I would say that it is an epiphanic moment when the child develops insight and then looks at something and says, this is one. Okay. And then the child say one. And that's when we all go through that experience when we are children, that we learn a new word and we keep using that word whenever it is possible. And when the child is learning something, if she develops insight into the concept, okay, then she has grasped the meaning of the thing. Then the word one does not continue to be a noise for her. It carries meaning. And the child would use the word one very meaningfully. So, unless this insight happens, that insight is what changes the noise one into a word one. Okay. And not just a word, it actually becomes a concept that the child is able to see everywhere, okay, and apply that concept to new situations also. Okay. Now, this process, like you see, I already packed so much into this process called insight. Now, how does that happen? Okay. Imagine you're a child and you're just hearing this noise, one, 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 and various things being shown, a lot of complex experiences. How would that insight happen? This is where the role of language becomes important. Right? That, you know, people, most of us think that the basic unit of language is words. That one, when I say one, okay, and I'm showing this paper and say one, all of you would say, Prakash said a word. Right? But Scheffler points out that no, Prakash is not saying a word. He's saying a sentence. That when I say one paper, okay, what I'm saying is that human beings call one instance of this thing one. Okay. And so the child or the learner is hearing a sentence. That sentence could be that Prakash expects me to say one, repeat the word one, or if the child is intentionally saying, okay, let me just think, okay, what is Prakash trying to say? Is he saying this is one? Oh, if he's saying this is one, okay, that's the basic unit Scheffler says of language is sentences. Even if you say a word, what the other person hears are sentences. So if I say one, what the child is saying, this is called one. Okay. Then the child could use language and ask the classic why question. Why call this one? Okay. Why should this be one? Why shouldn't this be two? Okay. These are sentences that we create. Only language gives us the ability that our mind has the ability to take language where we just take words, change sentences, and arrive at newer sentences which mean new things. Okay. And then you apply that new sentence back to reality. So when I say, why call this one? And any child could ask, why is two always bigger than one? Why shouldn't I say one is bigger than two? This actually is a very intelligent question, right? And which the child is just manipulating language, arriving at new sentences, which actually raise questions about new realities. Right? Because if I say two is greater than, why isn't two bigger than one? Why isn't two more than one? I would have to respond by explaining what more means. Right? Kam, zyada, konja, nariya, whatever I do, then I would, it through language, the child is actually pushing me to respond again through language and introduce the child to a new concept which I did not intend to teach today. Right? I might have thought that I'm going to teach numbers today, then I'll teach greater than less than tomorrow. But when the child employs language, and all human beings do, when they employ language, they're jumping into the next step of the syllabus. Right? And Scheffler points out that when we have to understand language as sentences, okay, and that people use sentences and jump much ahead. They can possibly jump much ahead and arrive at new sentences, which will lead to learning new concepts. And this is what Scheffler and Kant and quite a few people say that this is what one means that meaning is something that human beings impose on the world. So when I say one paper, this is the meaning of one is something that human beings have imposed on the world. There is nothing in the world or nothing in our experience which tells us that you know that we should see this as one, this as two. That so this insight, the process of insight necessarily involves language, using language to throw impose meaning on the world and meaning on the experience. In a classroom, to create an experience, that is not enough. You have to use language in such a way that you're able to nudge the child to develop insight into it, where move So the physical experience to a point when it becomes a mental experience, and it's not just mental experience it's of a certain kind where the child is using language and putting meaning on to the world out there. And hence the child is repeating that experience in totally new sentences, okay, which you would not expect. But you would, from the new sentences that the child is creating, only then you will know whether the child has learned or not. Okay. So I'll just pause here to rewind and just explain what I did in the last 10 minutes. I said that learning is necessarily started by experience. Okay. But experience is not all. Learning involves insight into something. And insight means seeing meaning into it such that it becomes your own, that you impose meaning on the world, and the concept one gains a different meaning such that it becomes part of your thinking. Okay? And and it changes you. Okay? And that change can happen only if you use language and impose meaning on the world out there. I took mathematics number as an example, but you could see that this concept could be applied to many different subjects. Just take the notion of gravity. Okay. Gravity is a strange word, right? Whenever all of us were in fifth or sixth standard, okay, you know, you could either call it Gurutwakarshan or you could call gravity or you could call, and many of us probably learned that gravity is like Earth is a magnet and we are stuck to it, which is actually a very incorrect understanding of gravity. Okay. But that apart, gravity is just noise for us. But then we learn that Earth has a acceleration due to gravity and all that, and that also requires insight, right? That we need to understand gravity in such a way that we are able to see gravity around us, and that, like same as the number one, gravity also requires insight. Use the example of freedom. That freedom is just a word, but what we want children to learn is what does it mean to be free. Okay. And that just merely giving the child freedom as an experience is not going to help in any way. To develop insight, you have to connect that experience to the concept of freedom, and the child develops insight, and child is able to connect, saying that this is what I am allowed to do in the school, and that means I'm allowed to be free. That is where we have arrived at so far, about learning and the importance of the role of language in developing insight into learning. But this is not all, right? When it comes to learning, okay, that if we say that the number one, gravity, freedom, all these things, the way I mentioned, it seems to involve, it seems to assume that the teacher has decided what these concepts are. That teachers have decided, I'm going to teach number system, I'm going to teach decimal number system, and I start with one. Science, the teacher has decided, I'll teach gravity, and then I'll move to acceleration due to gravity, and then various other concepts in physics related to that. When it comes to freedom, okay, the teacher decides that freedom is important, and this kind of freedom is important. Okay, what happens then is that somewhere, even though the child is intentionally, learning the language and developing the concept on her own, okay, it is only information that is being provided by the syllabus, by the teacher. This would seem to indicate that if the child is transformed and becomes a different person, it seems to indicate that the teacher is changing the child from one person to the other. The the role, the responsibility lies with the teacher, but there is a serious problem with this. The problem is that the teacher's rules are being lost. Look, the teacher decides this is how you should understand freedom. Okay, you should not understand freedom in any other way. This is how you should understand gravity. Then what happens? That it becomes, you know, it becomes something that knowledge, it doesn't, it's not knowledge. It actually is just information. Though the child has developed insight into it, okay, the child is developing the same insight that the teacher demanded on her, right? And that's and this is controlled by the rules that the teacher invented. Okay? And this is a serious problem because whether we should have rules which are determined by the world out when it comes to science. Okay, the teacher is not inventing deciding gravity. Earth will have so much gravity. Okay, it is the earth and the universe which is organized in such a way that gravity becomes what it is. Okay, if the child is learning the limited notion only from the teacher's understanding, okay, the child is either learning too little, okay, or the child is only learning that because the teacher said so. So what the child, apart from developing insight, what the child has to learn is also that the rules of the subject. Every subject area has its own rules. Right? Mathematics is completely bound by the rules of logic. So there is a logic behind why 2 is greater than 1, and 1 plus 1 is always 2. Okay, that is why 9 plus 1 is always 10. Okay. And if you speak in binary, then you would say 0 1 plus 1 0 is always 1 1, which is 3. Right? These are rules which are independent of a human being. So even if I were teaching mathematics, if the child is learning that according to Prakash, 1 plus 1 is 2, and Prakash's rules are 1 plus 1 is 2, then the child is, even if the child has insight and understands, the child has not learnt the right thing. What the child has to learn is have to learn the rules of logic. Okay. How would that happen? Again, language plays a role, right? Like I said earlier, okay, that you use language, then language gives a free rein. The learners can take words and use, following the rules of grammar, you can construct a completely illogical sentence, right? Which, you know, which could not mean anything, but it might actually mean something to the child, and the child might be learning something totally wrong. Okay, but the same ability of language could actually help to understand rules of a subject. So when the teacher creates an experience, then does many things using language to guide the child to develop insight. Okay. The job of a teacher doesn't stop there. You go further from that, that using language, the teacher has to you know, lead through language. The teacher has to lead the child to rules by even asking illogical questions. Like, do you think you have 4 chocolates and he has only 1 chocolate? Okay. And I say, oh, you don't have enough, even that one should be yours. Okay. Then the child would have to think and say, no, this is more. Okay. Then you could actually engage in a conversation about logic to say that why 4 is more than 1. Because it is 4 ones and this is only 1 1. Okay. And various such things which are bound by logic. Okay. Which logic can actually be communicated only in sentences, right, through language. So this is what I like to say, that this is the process of learning. Once that moment of insight has happened, after that language takes over, okay, the process of learning. After that, you just start working on sentences to understand rules of a certain subject. change this example to science, gravity, if it is magnet, then, if you understand gravity as a magnetic force, then you would say, oh, okay, if there is a magnet here and I'm sitting on the magnet, okay, does that mean that I am lighter? That the gravitational force of the earth will act lesser than on me because there is a big magnet I'm sitting on? Okay, these kind of sentences will introduce children, the learner, to the rules of science, which is not controlled by the teacher. It is it is controlled by the discipline of science, right? Or you take social studies, freedom, and the teacher just randomly stops the child and says, "No, you cannot talk when you're in class." And then the child raises her hand and teacher says, "Well, you can talk if you have my permission." These kind of contradictions will help the child understand the process of social studies, based social studies or the discipline of political science, which will help the child understand the idea of freedom better. And this is all only language that you're using. Then you would have to introduce the child that freedom is never absolute. It always comes with some constraints, like it is there in the Constitution of India. That you could see that everyone has the right to freedom of speech and expression, but it has to, follow public orders and decency, public norms of decency. Those are limitations on the notion of freedom, right? So I'm just using this as an example to point out that these are rules of the constitution or of political science or political philosophy that a child, even at the age of 8 or 9, when she starts learning the concept of freedom, she has to learn that these concepts are also governed by some rules. In the Indian society, we are governed by the constitution. So the child will later be able, in ninth standard or 10th standard, the child will be able to learn the constitution better if she has some preliminary basic understanding of the complexities of freedom. Right? So this way, there are rules in various subjects, okay, which is possible for a child to understand only through language, right? Because they are external realities. There is a limit to how many experiences you can give in class, right? I took a simple example of one, two, three, or gravity, or freedom. Basic idea of freedom I could give, but I can't give the vast kind of experiences that everyone goes through with related to freedom. You can only talk about it, right? And when I say talk about it, I'm saying that you can only use language to communicate the or teach the notion of freedom. Okay, so this is basically what I had planned. So if I were to summarize, I would just point out one slide which kind of summarizes the what I spoke about until now. Okay. So can you just see the slide number 5? Yeah. So everyone, if you could just, I know it's a complex sentence, but if you could read this first sentence, it actually depicts the complexity of language. I'll just be silent for a minute and then I'll try to explain this next. Okay, sorry, I just moved. So, see, this And part of the sentence which is marked in bold is what I've been trying to explain until now, that this is the capacity all human beings have, okay, related to language. That a sentence is not only signifying some fact. That if I say this is one paper, it is not only signifying, for a child learner, it is not only signifying this is one paper, which is a fact, but the child can understand its meaning indirectly. That's okay, one, and then paper, and then this, and the child can combine that and also say, why is it called one paper? Why can't you call two papers? Right? What the child is doing is it is taking parts of the sentence and then synthesizing, combining them differently to create a different meaning. Okay, and this way of thinking can be pushed forward by the teacher to also lead the child to ask difficult questions, so that the child will arrive at rules that govern the concept of one and a thing. Okay? And this is the complexity of language that I was trying to explain, and why it is important in learning. So, if I were to summarize what I said until now, okay, about the role of language in learning and teaching, okay, that one, we need to understand language as not only a particular spoken language or a particular means of communication, but that we need to understand it as a way of thinking, because language has culture, morality, and various norms embedded in it. The very word aap or ning, it contains a fair amount of Indian culture of maybe respecting elders, or maybe respecting anyone else. Okay, as against saying two. Okay, so this this is the way we need to understand language, not only as culture and moral, but also body language and gestures and learning. We need to understand it, that learning and teaching and learning, okay, should not be reduced only to experience. We have to use language to move from experience to insight, so that the child is able to, learner is able to develop meaning through language. Okay, develop an insight into the experience. And that is not enough. We have to push a little further to use language even more to understand rules of a certain subject. And the rules have immense moral implications, because only if the child herself understands the rules and accepts the rules, only then the child has earned the justification for learning. Until then, it just remains information. Why? Teacher said so. But once the child has understood that the rules come from nature, somewhere else, and the child accepts it, and that transforms the way the child is behaving, then you could say that the child has earned the justification for its knowing what it has learned. So I'll just stop here, pause for a minute, and I can take questions and answers and try to respond. So I see many interesting questions. So I'll just respond to one or some of the simple ones in the beginning. That one of them is a statement, right? Language learning in school is like reading a chapter, learning the question and answers, and writing exams. Prima facie, I think this is a fairly good process, right? That's how you need to learn language. Okay, when you read a chapter, you're supposed to comprehend what is written in the chapter, because that's how you learn language itself. Okay, and everything depends on the nature of questions which are asked, right? If you're literally asking questions which expect the child to repeat what is written in the chapter, then you're right, it is a bad question to ask, because it doesn't demand anything from the learner. Okay, but if I just combine this with another comment, that developing the ability to communicate clearly, accurately, okay, that could change the nature of questions that you ask in a language. Okay. But what I was referring to today in the talk is assuming language has to be learned in a certain manner. Okay. But I intentionally took examples from math, science, and social studies to point out that language is not, you cannot separate language. Though learning language and the complexities of grammar and literature is important in itself. Okay. I was making an additional point to say that language in the way we talk, I'm not talking about grammar. You could say grammatically wrong, but scientifically accurate sentence, right? What I was talking about is that the role of language in our mind when we are learning something. So you could even just now keep quiet, if you remain calm, quiet for 10, 15 seconds, you see your mind is running, constantly working. What do you say when your mind is working? What is happening is sentences come in your mind and you keep combining sentences, then images come. And I was talking about language in that sense of the term, not language as a subject. And that working of the mind necessarily happens in language. Language meaning it could even be gibberish. I'm not arguing for Hindi, Tamil, or any particular spoken language. I'm saying that, our thinking happens in words and sentences, right? And that is, that is, you know, that is what helps with understanding math, science, social science, or anything else. Okay. So in that sense, I would respond to the next question I see on the screen is, why should students learn language separately? Can this not be taught while teaching science or social science? Uh, I think this would do injustice to the spoken language and the cultural thing that language is. Okay. Because science cares about science, the language of science, right? That gravity has a certain meaning in physics. Okay. And when you learn science, you also have to learn the language of science. That when I'm speaking science or having a discussion about some scientific concept, I have to follow the rules of science, for which I'll have to speak the language of science. You know? I can't say gravity makes me, gravity means that there is a certain fear in the atmosphere. There I'm using the term gravity wrong. I'm bringing the idea of gravity which is used in literature. That someone writes there, Edgar Allan Poe or Saadat Hasan Monto writes a story with a certain gravity, okay, or a lack of gravity when he talks about horrendous experiences of the partition. That is there I'm using the concept word gravity as a literary term, not a physics term. So when I'm learning science, I have to learn the language of science. When I'm learning social studies or political science, I have to learn the language of political science. I can't mix it with literature, right? So I would say that language has to be learned separately to understand the history of a language, understand the grammar, understand literature. But when we teach science, you should be learning the language of science, okay? Which might be in English, it could be in Hindi, it could be in Tamil, it could be any. But the point is that the language of science is something else. Okay. Okay. So one more question that I see is that, why are we insisting education in mother tongue for primary classes? Should they not focus on education in English, as it is going to be useful in careers? I Let me first try and connect it to all that I said about learning. When I said that language is the foundational, it's the basis on which any learning happens. Okay, I think you cannot have a stronger justification for using mother tongue in the initial years. Okay, because children come, they're comfortable with a certain language, they think in a certain language, and then even in kindergarten or something, you suddenly you teach that in English. Okay, there is no way they'll understand. So everything that I said now about developing insight and developing it will not happen at all if they learn in a strange language. So I would say, like the NEP 2020 says, that the foundational years you have to, and this has been the case for the last 50 years. If you look at NCF National Curriculum Framework 2005 or go back to Kothari Commission report, the first education policy, everywhere there is an emphasis to say that learning is important and so it should happen through mother tongue or familiar. And as children progress, after that learning English becomes important in later years because most of the academic literature and you know if you look for science or anything, even a lot of Indian writing is primarily in English. So you would need to learn English later so that you can access those things and then slowly move to a point when you can start learning in English. So that's a complex answer to this rather simple question because I think, well, language is a complex issue and we need to clearly separate the two. The importance of language and culture, that is important in itself, and so language should be taught separately. Okay? And importance of language and learning makes it necessary for a familiar language in which the initial years are taught. And then later they could move further and start learning English. That's how the education policy has been dealing with the issue of language in India. So one more question is in APU, is there any language support available? Uh, yes, there is more than. I'll just explain it in two ways. That one, Azim Premji University values the diversity of contexts, cultures, languages across India. And so there is a conscious attempt to have children, students from across the country in India. In fact, we have, in every batch, we have students from pretty much most of the states in India, almost all the states in India. And so you would have many people with different varying understanding of English. Now the MA education program right now is English medium, okay, because this is higher education. So it should not be confused with school education that I spoke about until now. With higher education at that level, certain basic understanding of English is assumed. Okay. But after that, in the first semesters, okay, there is a conscious effort. In fact, it's a 2 credit course in MA education that we call it English language support course. Okay. That is something that you get 2 credits for that and you actually can do this course in parallel with the other courses in the first semester, which primarily helps you, gain a better understanding of English language so that will help you with learning the other subjects that we have, not only in the first semester, but so a simple answer to this question is yes, language support is available. The formal part is this course that you have. And the first semester, we talk to each student and make sure that people who need are enrolled to this course. And this doesn't stop here. There are various peer support from ways that we do. Even in the classroom, we we are okay with students speaking in different languages. Okay, but it's only that the faculty always responds in English. That's like the rule that we have to make sure that English language doesn't become a barrier from students to learn. So there are various other things that happen to encourage and to provide language support. Yeah. Do you have any? We can stop the slide, Sanjana. We can. Thank you. Do you have any other questions or anything? So can we end the session if there are no more questions? Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, then. Uh, thanks a lot for who have joined, and at least I enjoyed speaking about this. So I hope that people who attended enjoyed it too. So we'll probably meet some of you in a few months. Thank you so much.